Hey guys, Zomfox here. Today it is time to bring back a series that we haven't done a video on in a while, and that is the What If series. We did a couple of these before the 2025 UFL season. Now the season is over, we actually have a really good What If just for this past season alone. And as you see by the thumbnail, it is What If AJ McCarron returned to the Battlehawks for the 2025 UFL season. This is a big deal. The decision to basically get rid of AJ that Becht and the whole staff made in St. Louis was a very controversial decision, and in hindsight, it didn't work out, and even when the announcement was made, it wasn't really a great announcement considering who they were bringing in at quarterback. So we're going to be going over this what if, as it not only affects the Battlehawks, but in a weird way it also affects the Brahmas. If you know that whole situation, we'll get to that later. So let's get started with looking at the 2023 and 2024 Battlehawks. Now, the 2023 Battlehawks, right, these are both the two seasons with AJ McCarron at quarterback. In 23, the team went 7-3. Now, they did infamously get blown out in Week 9 at home against the Sea Dragons in what was essentially a playoff game, as they would then be forced to have to rely on Seattle basically losing in Week 10, which they didn't, and rest is history. Battlehawks missed the playoffs. But in 2024, the team actually made the playoffs, this time going 7-3 and winning their conference. Now, the asterisk was that in Week 10, the Brahmas were insanely hurt, and then once the Brahmas were healthier in the playoff game, they would end up getting beat pretty handily at home again to the Brahmas. Now, during both those seasons, AJ McCarron had a very solid seasons. His 2023 season especially was an incredible one of the better seasons in spring football in this era. 68.8 completion percentage is an absurd number. 24 to 6 TD interception ratio in the UFL, USFL, XFL is an insane number. And then his 108.4 rating, again, insanely good rating. Now, he did take a step back in 2024. As I've talked about a lot, his 2024 season was slightly overrated. He was still great, but everybody acted like he was an elite tier quarterback when he really played like great tier football. His 64 completion percentage was still really good, but his average yards per pass ended up going down by over a full yard. His TD interception ratio dropped to 15 TDs to 4 interceptions, and his passer rating ended up going down to 98.9. Again, still an incredible season, but just not as high of a level as the 2023 season. Now, this ended up sparking a big debate because Anthony Becht ended up deciding to basically get rid of AJ, wanting essentially a dual threat quarterback. That was what everybody knew he meant. By saying he wanted a new quarterback position, looking at new opportunities, everybody under the sun knew that he wanted a dual threat quarterback. That was what they ended up wanting. So let's head over to 2025 QB stats. The 2025 QB stats for the Battlehawks. They would have 3 quarterbacks play football for him. Max Duggan, Manny Wilkins, and Brandon Silvers. Now, Javen Cordero was supposed to be that third guy, not Silvers, but an injury, very untimely, ended up making it to where he saw like a couple of snaps during the season. So it ended up being the other 3 guys. Now, what you will notice when looking at these other 3 guys is that one of them was clearly a better passer than the others. That was Brandon Silvers. That St. Louis Battlehawks passing you see at the top in between the images of the quarterbacks, that is from their playoff game against the DC Defenders. And note that a decent amount of Max Duggan's stats in that 7-14 for 105 yards came at the very end of the game in garbage time. And even with those, Silvers thoroughly outplayed him in that game. Then you take the regular season into account. Yes, Silvers was playing, against like a DC team, not going full throttle. It was the end of the season. But when you consider that Max Duggan also played during that same stretch a little bit, Brandon Silvers, again, was the best quarterback. He had a much better accuracy at 72.2%, 1 TD, 0 interceptions, only got sacked once in the limited time he was out there, had a 128.2 rating, whereas Max Duggan and Manny Wilkins both hovered around 73%. Now, Manny Wilkins had a couple of great initial games, but the big asterisk is that we didn't realize how bad the Brahmas are going to be, and that Houston just had a really bad Week 1. Once he did play in Week 3, it wasn't great, and then of course he got hurt. Max Duggan, insanely inconsistent. He gave us a couple of solid games. He gave us a lot of real stinkers. The only thing that Duggan and Wilkins had was their ground ability to run, which again is the biggest reason why Becht got rid of AJ. But with that being said, it really didn't overcome how much weaker they got in the passing attack. The fact is, at the end of the season, the best quarterback on their roster was the only quarterback that was a traditional pocket passer quarterback. It was not Manny Wilkins. It was not Max Duggan. It was Brandon Silvers. I've been on record and still stand by that if the Battlehawks are going to bring back any quarterback to this upcoming season, it has to be Brandon Silvers 1 and arguably Cordero 2, since we really didn't get to see what he could do. Max Duggan, Manny Wilkins, they proved enough, especially Manny, that they are not going to be a quarterback that brings you to a championship. I hope Manny gets well, but the fact is, before he got hurt, that Week 3 game really showed a lot of the flaws that he still had as a quarterback at this level. And yes, Max can run. He had the 5 rushing touchdowns. But even when you count that, does it really mean all that much when the team still can't win in the passing attack? No. So, that is the big deal why bringing back AJ would be a big deal. If AJ is back, you have a significant automatic upgrade. Again, AJ McCarron's weakest season was the 64 completion percentage in 2024. That wouldn't be as high as Manny Wilkins, but what would have been better is the TD interception ratio, even including Manny's ground TDs. So you would have had a much more efficient quarterback that would have over 20 points higher on passer rating, meaning you have a much more efficient passer. Helps your defense out, helps your ground game out. Overall, would be a big deal. So, what if they had AJ? Well, look at their season. They ended up finishing 8-2 during the regular season. It was the best record in the entire league this past season. Look at those 2 losses to DC and Arlington. What you will notice is that those were 2 of the, if not the 2 weakest quarterback performances of the season for the Battlehawks. Manny Wilkins, after having the great 2 games against, again, what ended up being a very cupcake San Antonio Brahmas team, and just a Week 1 not really gelled defense of Houston, once he had to play a real team in the Defenders, which again, we didn't know for sure how real they were, but again, hindsight, they were a real team, he got exposed. 3 interceptions, and this wasn't like the Arlington game last year where all 3 of them were at the last minute of the game. These were 3 interceptions. Even without that, 55 completion percentage, horrid number. Less than 10 yards per completion. You know, I hate that. Then Max Duggan against the Renegades. Yes, they still had a shot to win the game. One of the interceptions was at the very end of the game. Again, even without an interception, sub 50 completion percentage, 78 yards passing, 1 interception, abysmal. And of course, the last one was a pick 6 they threw. If you have AJ McCarron, there's a very real shot that you win both those games. It's as simple as that. If you put AJ McCarron in at quarterback for those 2 games, there is a much higher likelihood they go 2-0 than they go 0-2. And arguably a better likelihood they go 2-0 than 1-1. The Arlington game, if you have AJ in a quarterback, you know, you don't have to deal with Manny's tragic injury where he got hurt immediately tearing his Achilles. So that's 1 touchdown off the board for Arlington, and the other touchdown off the board for Arlington at the end with the pick 6. Does AJ McCarron put up at least 15 points? You're damn right he does. Now, against DC, does he throw all those interceptions? No. Does he throw more touchdowns and throw better passes? Yes, even though there was a lot of issues with the 2024 season, with him throwing a lot of checkdowns and issues like that, the bottom line is it still would have been a more effective offense than what this Manny Wilkins-led Battlehawks team did in Week 3. So it is entirely possible that if you had AJ McCarron at quarterback, saying everything else went the way it did, because really, it's hard to look at any of these games and be like, yeah, you know what, if you had a different quarterback, you would have lost. Aside from, ironically, the Stallions game, I will say, that was probably the best game that Max Duggan gave you all season. Max Duggan at his peak is objectively better than AJ McCarron. And that's not, you know, a dig at AJ, as we all know. If you're a dual threat quarterback and you can give us a peak passing performance and run, you will be better than a pocket passer. It's just how it's always gone, right? If you get the best game of all time out of a quarterback that is a great dual threat quarterback, it's going to be better than the best game for a pocket passer most of the time. That's the only game I feel like they may have lost if AJ was at quarterback instead of Max Duggan. Aside from that, I think everything else is the same. The Michigan game, that one wasn't really because of Max Duggan. It was a weird game. I know he did some solid performance in that game too. I think that AJ still would have gotten the W there. Birmingham may have lost. But aside from that, that's still a 9-1 record. I think that at the end of the day, this team goes 9-1 if AJ is the starting quarterback with a real possibility of 10-0. Now, that's not everything though. Because what about the XFL Conference Championship game? Now, this is a big deal. So on the top left, you got last year's Conference Championship game, seeing what AJ did against let's call it like it is, a much better defense than what this DC Defenders defense was. And, of course, the championship game this year between the Panthers and the Defenders. Now, when you look at the drive chart of this game this year, what you will notice is the little 2 drives in that highlighted yellow box. Those 2 drives were the 2 drives you actually got out of Brandon Silvers. Now, this is very bad coaching by Anthony Beck. The fact that he didn't put in Silvers earlier was asinine. But when he did put him in, immediately you saw how much better the offense looked. Now, the first drive did not end up with a touchdown. It ended up with a turnover on downs. Though it looked a lot better, and let's call it like it is, it was really the best drive you had all day to that point, minus the touchdown drive, which even that one was mainly because of an interception. And then the touchdown drive he had after that was the best drive all day. So your 2 best drives pretty much in the entire day were because of Brandon Silvers, who, as shown earlier, went 6 of 10 for 81 yards and a touchdown, versus Duggan, who, even with garbage time, ended up going 7 of 14 for 105 and an interception. Now, Duggan had 33 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Again, that was a garbage time touchdown. Didn't really play all that well. AJ McCarron last year against a much better San Antonio defense in 2024 ended up going 19 of 29 for 177 and a touchdown. It was not a incredible performance, but it was a really good performance. You put that kind of performance with this Battlehawks team the whole game, it's possible they get the W. It's hard to say that they would have won because it's like with Silvers. I don't think if you got Silvers in the whole game, it's a guaranteed W. But I do feel like if you had AJ McCarron in this game, there is a real shot that they win this game. I think it's safe to say that. You don't have those first 3 drives or back to back to back. You're just punting the ball relatively quickly. You're gaining basically 20 yards of offense and punting it. You don't have that happen. You get at least, let's say, 6 points from that. Add that to your final score. You end up hitting 24. You know what I mean? And so that already makes it a closer game, but then you also have like the fumble, the end of the game, and even that's only saying you get 6 points. At the end of the day, I think if you're AJ McCarron in this game, there's a real shot you win this game. If you do win this game, the championship is a very tough call. This championship is going to go down as a really awkward one if you really watch the game and understand how football works. Because Bryce Perkins played an incredible game, and in most scenarios, what he did would have been enough to win. There was just a lot of really weird things that happened early on in the game, and then Te'amu gave us the best game, the best single game performance that any QB in this era of spring football has given us. So the bottom line is, I don't think that this is as simple as, oh, if the Battlehawks made the game, they would have won. This isn't like the Panthers and Stallions last year, where you got that feeling that if Michigan had made it to the championship game, they also would have curb stomped San Antonio. This one isn't necessarily like that, because the fact that Perkins gave you such a good performance and still got beat by so much because Te'amu just was essentially perfect. I know he technically didn't have a perfect passer rating. He was perfect. So, it's not a guarantee they win the championship. But the bottom line is they would have at the very least put up a hell of a lot of a better performance against DC. And then if they did beat DC, would have had a real shot at winning the championship. But that's not everything. What about the attendance this season? This is another thing that I think a lot of people don't fully bring up, and that's the fact that attendance did go down this season, and I think that part of that is AJ. You lost your main guy. This was your main face of the franchise in AJ McCarron. You ended up losing him, and it was a very public divorce, as the saying would go. Now, yes, you did have the extra home game that was always going to hurt your attendance somewhat, with the extra game that wasn't part of the season ticket package. Bottom line is, though, you went down pretty significantly in regards to just pure numbers. 4K down in attendance is a rough number to go down, though obviously it's still the best number in the league by a country mile. Now, conference final game was down almost 3,000. Your week 1 game down 8,000. A lot of this I do think look as AJ. I think that if AJ was back, your average is over 30,000. I would say over 31,000. I'm not going to sit here and act like AJ McCarron would have made your attendance be 35K. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. But I do feel like if you had AJ at quarterback, your attendance or your average attendance would have been over 31,000. Would have been a much more of a slight drop-off than what it ended up being. The main reason for that is because AJ McCarron was someone who clearly was a draw. We saw that with Birmingham last year, or I guess 2 years ago in 2024, how just because AJ was coming back, the Stallions had such a great game. I think that would have been similar this year, except the other side. Losing AJ, you lost the face of your franchise, and a lot of people who saw initially, especially that Week 3 area, it's entirely possible that a lot of people that would have come to the Week 5 and Week 6 games just straight up didn't because they saw how much worse the team was whenever their quarterbacks were not playing that perfect level against bad defenses. So I think that when you look at it, attendance would have been probably around 2,000 per game higher than it was, this past season if you had AJ back. But there is one more thing to talk about. AJ Smith and the Brahmas. Now, let's it's hard to explain this. Bottom line is AJ Smith basically tried to throw a bunch of people under the bus. A lot of people are throwing AJ under the bus. A lot of people blame AJ Smith for all the issues. Let's just look at this as objectively as possible. What is, at least to the overall viewing, as the biggest reason AJ Smith left, according to AJ Smith, was mainly the general manager. Now, was it the GM who decided to make the call, make Peyton Pardee the coach? Was that the whole reason AJ left at the very end? Bottom line is, the GM, Mark Lilbridge, is the biggest reason AJ Smith left the Brahmas. And the major reason for that was the AJ McCarron saga. He would reveal that AJ McCarron was not only going to play for the Brahmas, but was going to show up in November to train with AJ Smith to get the offense ready, and so AJ would know the playbook. That was what was said by AJ Smith. The AJ connection was what was going to happen. But the GM canned it until about week 9, where he randomly called AJ McCarron and Desmond Ridder and said, hey, can you show up with 4 days notice? And both of them obviously said no. So that was a huge deal. So if AJ McCarron is still with the Battlehawks, this saga doesn't happen. You don't have this big deal of, oh, we're going to get AJ McCarron, and the GM's like, actually no, even though you'd be better than Kellen Mond. Again, hindsight's 20/20. But even I told you, and by you I mean I told everybody, that this Brahmas quarterback room, heading into the season, once you got past Kellen Mond, was an absurdly weak quarterback room. And guess what? Kellen Mond didn't live up to the hype. Kevin Hogan had a couple of okay performances, then just completely crapped the bed against the Showboats, and your quarterback room ended up being just terrible. AJ McCarron would have been a hell of a lot better than who you had. So, if this whole scenario doesn't happen, does that mean AJ Smith stays? Does that mean that even if Peyton Pardee would still become the interim head coach, that AJ Smith would end up staying because he would have had better relationships with the people involved? It's possible. Now, there's a lot of questions about it. Again, as I've mentioned before, when AJ Smith did end up leaving, just coincidentally, the Brahmas actually had some of their better offensive performances of the season, though, as we all know, they only had 4 games putting 20 points up there. How much of that was just issues with the team itself? Was it that AJ was gone, they had a different offense? Or what if AJ was there, would they have had a better offense talking about AJ Smith? It is possible that AJ Smith may have even become the head coach if he had a better relationship. It's possible this whole thing strained his relationship with the GM, and that's what led to the GM calling to make Peyton Pardee the interim head coach. We don't know for sure, but this is a big factor to note when you consider this whole scenario. If AJ McCarron returns to the Battlehawks, you don't have this whole saga of the Brahmas where he was going to go to the Brahmas, but the GM then shot it down and it pissed off AJ Smith, and then other issues that came up later ended up being the straw that broke the camel's back, which probably would have been when he was told that Pardee would become the head coach and not him. We don't know for sure, but again, it's one of those things where you can kind of connect the dots, right? This whole scenario with AJ McCarron was the biggest factor of the whole AJ Smith saga and him leaving, because Wade wasn't really there during the preseason. Yes, there was issues with him, but again, if you don't have this whole AJ McCarron situation, you don't have those issues with Wade Phillips get as big as they were. A lot of things just get, simply put, fixed if this doesn't happen. So the Brahmas themselves would have been a different team. Now, they wouldn't have been a much different team, but I do feel like they would have been a different team. It would have been very interesting to see, because in this scenario as well, AJ Smith is not going to be viewing it as a we should have AJ McCarron. Even if you try to forget it, if you put yourself in AJ Smith's shoes, you're viewing, hey, we get AJ McCarron. We can get one of the best quarterbacks in spring football. And then you end up getting told, no, you're not, and you're going to be with Kellen Mond. You're now viewing it with a worse outlook, meaning that you could end up being a worse coach to Kellen Mond, not because you just hate the guy, but because you're thinking about AJ McCarron. So if this whole thing changes, maybe the offense doesn't perform as bad as they do in the first 2 weeks. They'd still probably lose, but what if they put up, let's say, 18-18 those 2 weeks instead of 9-9? Much better look. What if they don't put up back-to-back 3-point stinkers against Houston and Birmingham? Look a lot better. You know, I think that they may have only won maybe like 1 or 2 more games, but they wouldn't have demolished the record for the worst point differential in spring football history. Big question mark, but I think that's the final point that needs to be brought up for this what if. Overall, that'll do it. Let me know down below what you thought about this what if, and if you have any more suggestions for a future what if episode, let me know down below. because again, this is a very fun series to do. I completely forgot about this one for a week or two. Then I'm like, you know what? I forgot I made those videos. And with the AJ McCarron whole situation, the AJ Smith stuff, it kind of fit really well to make this video. So I hope you all enjoyed this one. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified when I upload any videos if you enjoyed this video. Go to my community post, depending when this video comes out. I may still have spots open in my fantasy football league. If you win, you end up getting your name posted on the channel banner. You can already see Mold 10 from last year's on there. Think about becoming a community member for as low as 99 cents a month. You get an exclusive video every month. Getting close to the NFL preseason. Again, going to have videos covering UFL players in the preseason. So be looking for all those. And as always, guys, have a great night.